Hey kids, all right, so now we are going to start 1984, this unit, and before we start that I want to give you some background just like normal, take some notes. This stuff is to help you understand the world where it's coming from. I'm going to go into a little bit about history, a little bit about Marxist philosophy, and show you how the book takes those ideas and combines them and paints a really dark look at the future. The book is super relevant today because it focuses on something called the surveillance state, which I'll get into in a little bit, and that's very relevant to the time and place we're living in. So, without further ado, here we go. All right, so the book you're reading, or you're going to be reading, is called 1984, and it is by a guy named George Orwell. Now, George Orwell was a British writer. He was born in colonial India. When he grew up, he actually was like a district, a district like commander or something in Burma. He wound up moving back to England, and he became a really famous writer. He wrote 1984, believe it or not, in the year, so written in 1948. World War II had just ended, and in 1948, what was going on was I'll wait for it, but I can't hear any of you, so I'll just say, Civil War. No, it wasn't. It was definitely the Cold War. Definitely the Cold War, but because I have to move on, we're just going to do that. That was really bad. So anyway, the Cold War. The Cold War was after Russia had come in through Eastern Europe, they wound up absorbing all of the countries they had invaded, this being Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, Estonia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. They all became Soviet blocs. Now, if you don't remember, the Soviet Union was a communist country. And so when they came in and took those over, they forced those governments to be communist. Now, what George Orwell saw, right, on the other side of the Iron Curtain, that's what they called it, the difference between Western Europe and the Soviets, was that the USSR worked on something called a surveillance state. Now, a surveillance state, so a surveillance state is when, surveillance state is when the government has complete tabs on everybody. This includes like secret police, hiring your neighbors, your family members. You could literally be sitting in a cafe, you'd say something bad about Stalin, and you would be gone by the week's end. Somebody would have reported you, somebody's always listening, you would just disappear, and if anyone asked about where you went, they would also disappear. An example I always think of was in East Germany. There's this really good actor, one of my favorites. He was in the movie Lives of Others. He was a stage actor in East Germany, and his wife was actually a state agent that, when she was married to him, she reported to the state what he was saying at home. So that's the kind of thing it is. So basically, it's surveillance state is where the government has tabs on everybody. So in America, this is an issue because, and for ERWC class, we're going to get into this a little bit, next week. With a surveillance state, or at least in America, they can listen to your phone calls depending on what you say. They could look up your internet stuff. They could check your social media. Google, Apple, and stuff like that regularly go through all of your emails to send you marketing stuff. So this is something that's happening like right now. With us, okay? The book 1984, as it was written in 1948, if you didn't see that, you just switch the numbers around, is supposed to be a warning for the future. This was 40 years in the future from when he wrote it. Of course, the reality in the book is not quite what happened, but it's supposed to be a warning that if the people don't stand up for what they see as wrong, then the government can have this kind of control over you, okay? So that's just basic background for this book, for the real life part. We're going to go into Marxism now, and then after that we're going to see how they relate to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. The cool thing about these YouTube videos is you can just hit pause. If you didn't take notes, we don't have to sit here and wait. I mean, not that we're wanting to, or that we have a problem with sitting and waiting. You're always welcome to take as much time as you need. But now, you could just pause the video and type it out. So, next thing we're going to go over is the philosophy of Marxism. This is fun, because guess who this was created by? A man named Karl Marx, right? Written in the 1800s with his good friends Friedrich Engels. And Karl Marx was a historian, and he had saw that, he wasn't a philosopher, an economist, or anything like that, he was a historian, and he saw that all of the conflicts and trials in human history all base themselves on economics and politics. He sees the world as constantly a reaction to class struggle, okay? Now, under Marxism, he defines 3 separate classes of people. So write that here, 3 classes. This stuff we use kind of in our everyday speech, so there's a lot of Marxism in just how we talk about things. So if any of this sounds familiar, that's awesome. So the first class is the upper class. It's what he called the capitalists. Okay? Now, what the capitalists are is, we're going to write upper class here, but also they live on what's called passive income. They do not work for their money. When I say work, they do not show up to a job. They do not clock in and clock out. They just make money off of real estate, the stock market, or owning large businesses. They don't actually work. It's what Bernie Sanders would call like the 1%, or whatever he says. You know, these are the top guys. You know, Bill Gates types, Warren Buffett. You know, the people who don't actually go to work. They don't actually have a job. They sit there and they make money on other people. Those are the capitalists. All right? The next group of people, and this is going to be a very hard word to spell. I've had to spell check it a bunch of times. And even then, you see right now, I have to take a look and a pause because, you know, the French. Anyway, so the bourgeoisie. There are 2 distinct classes of bourgeoisie. There is the grande, that's a G, and the petite. Essentially, you have the upper middle class and the lower middle class. Okay. These people, depending on where you are, maybe you own a business. We're not talking about these big, massive industry types. We're talking like, you know, maybe you own a bookshop or a coffee shop or a restaurant. Maybe you're a private contractor. Maybe you do taxes. Maybe you do, you know, other stuff. Or lower middle class, maybe you just go to a salary job. Most of people in California are here in the bourgeoisie, either grande or petite, doesn't matter. It's people who go to work. They're not like, it's not paycheck to paycheck, like they're okay. They're more focused on like going to college, stuff like that. This is where a lot of families are, you know, where at least in California, I'm talking about our society. You know, you might own a shop, you might own some apartments, but it's not to the point where, you know, you don't have to do anything and just millions of dollars are rolling in. This is where it's at, okay? And finally, the last class we're going to talk about is called the proletariat. And in America, we call that the working class. Now, the proletariat are the people who show up to work and it's literally paycheck to paycheck. Maybe they don't have savings. Maybe they're having trouble paying even medical bills. I mean, this is like where most of America is. I mean, California, we're up here because we have kind of a higher standard of living. But most of America is definitely working class. The proletariats, you know, a lot of Americans don't have savings. You know, if they got sick, it's going to be hard to take care of themselves or their family. I'm sure a lot of you are either familiar with it, living it, or know your parents or friends. Like, working class is pretty common here. Again, this is super hard, super rare, Bourgeoisie is kind of normal for California. Down here, everyone's had experience with it. Now, so those are the three classes Marx sets up. And according to him, all three of these are constantly at war with one another. Okay? The bourgeoisie always wants to overthrow the capitalists. The proletariat always wants to overthrow the system. And the capitalists always wants to keep these two down and suppressed. These conflicts are based on each class's ideology. Okay? Ideology might be a word you've heard before, but it was coined by Marx. I believe it was coined by Marx. I checked 2 nights ago, and I thought it said it was coined by Marx. Anyway, I'll check again. Yeah, so ideology is basically a world view. Each class has a specific world view, the way they see the world, the way they interpret things, the way they set their priorities. So, for example, the capitalist worldview is that everything, their motivation to do anything, is for the sake of profit and market effectiveness. The whole point is, how can I make more money and have it cost me less? That is the point of the capitalist ideology. Come hell or high water, I want these profits by this time, and I don't want to put too much into it. All right? That's the way the capitalists think. The bourgeoisie, whether you're petite or grand, doesn't matter. We're going to double check spelling. Okay? The bourgeoisie is the grand and petite, focused on morality, culture, status. I am sure this will sound really familiar. Middle-class families are more worried about maybe how other people see them, like their neighbors, people around them. They're focused on culture. You know, they might like some art stuff. They go to the movies, go to concerts, you know, that kind of thing. Morality. It's just tied in with status. They don't want you out partying too much. Like, you should do everything in moderation. Partying too much is a no-no. You know, having sex outside of marriage, that kind of stuff. The whole point for the bourgeoisie is to put on this air, you know, like this look that they act in a higher class, right? So that's where the morality is. Even though capitalists don't care at all about morality, they just care about making money, thus the Kardashians. All right? And then finally we have the proletariat. I'll get out of the way in a second. So the proletariat is, their entire ideology is survival. They work paycheck to paycheck. They need to worry about gas. They need to worry about electricity. They need to worry about water. They need to worry about their medical bills. Everything is paycheck to paycheck. So it is survival mode for them. Okay? A lot of time religion is really big because it's seen as an escape. When you die, there's an afterlife. You can get out of the hell that is your world. Now, the whole point of Marxism is that these ideologies cannot exist. And so when one gets more powerful enough, or when one pushes too much on the other, it overflows, it explodes, and then you have revolution. Okay? With revolution, you know, the bourgeoisie are always trying to get kicked out the capitalists. Just like you had in the Soviet Union, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat revolted. They wound up killing and purging most of the upper class Russian folk. And then, of course, it's supposed to lead to communism, which means there are no classes anymore. That is the whole point, that you fight and fight until you eliminate the concept of class. Yeah, thus the old joke, you know, your mother must be a communist because she's got no class. Anyway, moving on. Again, if you need those notes, you may click reverse on the video or pause, whatever you wish. Let's talk about revolution for 1 second. The whole point of a revolution, and now we're tying this into the book, okay, we're tying it into the book now. The whole point of a revolution is to overthrow and to start something new. But there's another meaning for revolution, okay? And with revolution, you may overthrow and start over, or Like the word actually says. You may have a starting point, go 360 degrees, and wind up right back where you started. Often we find in revolutions that when the bourgeoisie and proletariat overthrow the capitalists, the bourgeoisie become the new capitalists. In America, we had a revolution. The guys who led the revolution were kind of the upper class white guys. They kicked out the British, and then those upper class white guys became the new capitalists. In France, it was the same thing. And thus, in this book, 1984, the revolution takes a similar thing. In the 1950s, in the book, there's a big revolution, lots of purges, the capitalists are killed off, the proletariat overthrows, everyone moves up a notch, and now we have a redefined class system. In the book, 1984, there are 3 classes of people. And this should sound really familiar. There's what's called the inner party. These are the top head honcho guys who are running everything. Okay? Then there's the outer party. Our main character, Winston, is part of the outer party. He works in a salaried job, he's got a stable paycheck, he's got an apartment, all that stuff. And finally, we have the Proles, who, if you look at the word, is pretty obvious, the proletariat. This system that George Orwell built for us, he terms ingsoc, which is a newspeak word. Now the next video is about newspeak, so you'll know what that is. It's a newspeak word for English socialism. So it's a socialist country, and that leads to our final point that we're going to discuss in this video. Okay, and that final point is how the world of 1984 is built. After the revolutions of the 1950s, there are now 3 superpowers. Okay? There is the country of Oceania, the country of Eurasia, and the country of Eastasia. The world is separated into 3 superpowers. Oceania is where it's comprised of North America. That's a little weird. South America, South Africa, Australia, and England, which in the book is now called Airstrip 1. England, this is where it takes place. So we have the continent of Oceania. Now we have the next superpower, Eurasia, consisting of Russia, Europe, and the Middle East. Okay, so Eurasia is Russia, Europe, the Middle East, and finally East Asia. We have China, Korea, Japan, and I'm going to say Siam, but it's that peninsula down there, with like Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia. So you have these 3 countries. They are eternally at war with each other. They are constantly fighting. They're still trying to win land in Central Africa and in India. They are non-stop going after each other, okay? Okay? So, yeah, that's about it. That's about it for 1984. If you guys have any other questions about this, email me, send me an Edmodo thing, whatever you feel to understand it. You don't really need to know much of this outside of like what's going on for the book, because the book explains it a lot, but I'm just trying to give you an introduction so when you start reading, you're not totally lost, okay? Right, so if you have any other questions, send me an email, just let me know. I'd be happy to answer you. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Remember, I'm on my computer throughout most of the day, just so you guys can have an opportunity to ask questions and stuff. Right, so here we are. All right, have a good day.